The perfect scam requires no deception, only absolute belief in your own fiction. Ashes of Creation raised $3.3 million on Kickstarter, the most successful MMO crowdfunding campaign in history. 8 years of development, over 100 developers, a community of hundreds of thousands who believed in every promise, defended every delay, and waited through every setback. Then, on January 29, 2026, weeks after launching into early access, the studio published a letter to the community. The game was worthy of your investment. Development updates were coming. The world was still growing. 2 days later, the studio shut down. Over 100 developers laid off. No severance. Stephen Sharif resigned from his own company. The board pulled the plug. The game that hundreds of thousands had waited nearly a decade for, gone in 48 hours. And here's what makes it strange. Nobody was lying. The founder didn't run off with the money. He lost everything. The developers weren't running a grift. They sacrificed their careers for nothing. The investors weren't idiots. They followed signals that looked real. The community wasn't naive. They did their research, asked questions, made informed decisions. Nobody won. Nobody lied. Everyone believed. So how did this become the MMO genre's most perfect scam? Because when everyone believes, founder, developers, investors, community, it stops looking like a scam at all. It looks like the future. Until the market says otherwise. For years, every signal pointed the same direction. Reddit full of posts demanding old-school MMOs. YouTube videos about hardcore systems pulling millions of views. Forums overflowing with passionate essays about full loot PvP, player-driven economies, meaningful death penalties. The noise was deafening. It felt like a movement. Stephen Sharif saw it. Asmongold amplified it. Lazy Peon celebrated it. The community rallied around it. And everyone read these signals the same way. If this much content is trending, there must be massive demand. The solution seemed obvious. An independent developer who actually loved the genre could save MMOs. This would be the game that proved it. But they made the oldest mistake in human behavior. They confused volume for size, loudness for demand. They measured attention, not markets. And those aren't the same economy. It took Ashes collapsing to make me understand something fundamental. The economy that drives YouTube views and the economy that sustains MMOs measure completely different things. Let me show you how the attention economy works. Asmongold didn't stumble into building one of YouTube's biggest gaming channels. He mastered what performs. Content that validates frustration, that romanticizes nostalgia, that critiques modern design, that positions players against greedy corporations in a David versus Goliath story. That's the formula. It riles emotions. Emotions drive engagement. Engagement signals the algorithm. The algorithm pushes reach. Reach generates millions of views. But here's the gap nobody saw. Watching a 20-minute video about how modern MMOs betrayed players is entertainment. Screaming in the comments about corporate greed is emotionally satisfying. Instant dopamine. Actually playing a hardcore MMO with punishing systems for years? Completely different experience. The dopamine doesn't come instantly anymore. One is consumption. The other is commitment. One gives you satisfaction now. The other asks you to endure systems that might erase weeks of progress, waste hours of your time, punish mistakes you didn't know you were making, all for a payoff that might never come. These measure different things entirely. And when you understand that viral attention and actual player behavior aren't the same economy, everything about Ashes makes sense. Diablo Immortal launched June 2022. Reddit exploded. YouTube filled with condemnation. The backlash felt universal. Players were furious. This mobile pay-to-win garbage ruins everything. Boycott Blizzard. The outrage was massive. Content creators built entire videos around the anger, pure dopamine-fueled rage flooding every platform. And then the revenue numbers came in. $2 million per day. Over $500 million in the first year. That's real demand. Not what people say in comments. Not what gets upvoted. Not what generates views. What they actually do when the product exists and the choice becomes real. Markets don't measure opinions. They measure behavior. And this pattern keeps killing MMO projects. Players say they want one thing and genuinely believe it because saying it feels good. But when those systems go live, when the friction becomes routine, almost nobody actually chooses the hardcore experience. They choose something else. Every single time. The actual market for hardcore systems is tiny. A passionate, vocal minority. But they sound like a majority because the internet amplifies drama. YouTube's algorithm rewards certain narratives. Reddit's upvotes validate beliefs. Attention is massive. Actual demand, who stays, who pays, who plays long-term, is small. Think about it. If hardcore MMO demand existed at the scale it felt online, why aren't Blizzard, NetEase, and Nexon building these games? These are the most ruthlessly efficient, profit-seeking entities capitalism has ever produced. They don't miss real markets. They hunt them obsessively. So why did every modern MMO converge on the same design? Accessibility, convenience, reduced friction, streamlined progression, respecting player time. Not because these companies hate money or gamers, because 20 years of data, millions of players, retention curves, revenue analytics, behavioral metrics, all pointed the same direction. At the scale needed to fund AAA live service operations, players choose convenience. Not because it's philosophically superior, because it's what generates the most engagement per effort in 2026. What players actually tolerate when the novelty wears off and they have jobs and lives. Markets don't lie. They measure what people do. And ignoring that reality to fund one of gaming's most expensive genres with only niche demand? We know how that ends. Ashes had everything the attention economy values. Millions of YouTube views, positioning it as the savior MMO that would defeat evil corporations and rescue the genre. Perfect drama, satisfying narrative, endless dopamine for content creators. But there's a problem. The better a game is for players, the less drama it generates. The more drama it creates, usually the worse the product actually performs. And beneath all that attention was math that never worked. The monetization, cosmetics, Kickstarter pledges, alpha access, came from a niche market. The ambition was AAA scale, AAA polish, years of live operations, hundreds of developers, constant content updates. You can't fund mass market operations by monetizing a niche audience. The revenue from passionate believers, no matter how passionate, couldn't cover the operational costs of what was being built. This isn't speculation. This is arithmetic. The belief was so strong, the signals felt so real, the community seemed so large. Nobody questioned the assumption. Everyone saw attention and assumed it meant sustainable demand at the scale needed. It didn't. And this isn't new, hasn't been for a while. Darkfall New Dawn promised hardcore PvP and launched to passionate fans. The population collapsed within months. Mortal Online promised player-driven chaos. Same outcome. Chronicles of Illyria promised revolutionary systems. It never even launched. Crowfall promised throne wars at massive scale. It shut down after struggling to retain players. Ashes of Creation followed the exact same path. Every single one. Passionate community, successful crowdfunding, years of development. Then launch. Then population collapse. Revenue insufficient to sustain operations. Shutdown. They all made the same mistake. They built for attention signals instead of behavioral demand. They saw loud voices and assumed large markets. They mistook passion for population. They confused what performs on YouTube with what sustains MMO operations. And the ultimate tragedy is that Stephen Sharif wasn't actually running a scam. He was living inside one. So perfect, he couldn't see it. The developers were building toward a mirage that looked real from every angle. The investors were following signals that seemed legitimate and clear. The community was doing exactly what the internet trained them to do. Mistake engagement for consensus, volume for market size, viral content for sustainable demand. The MMO community convinced itself that nostalgia for yesterday would solve the problems of tomorrow. And then the market spoke. Behind all the YouTube views, all the Reddit threads, all the viral tweets, what mattered was what people actually did when forced to choose between watching drama and playing a game. When that choice became real, the players weren't there. Not in numbers large enough to fund initial development. Not in numbers sustainable enough for long-term operations. Ashes chased increasingly expensive funding to support AAA ambitions with a market that kept shrinking. And that's why this was always doomed from the beginning. Not because Stephen Sharif was dishonest, or because the developers didn't work hard enough, or because the community was stupid, but because its entire premise was built against market reality. Save gamers from the suits. Prove indies can beat corporations. Go the opposite direction of every successful MMO publisher. Which means going against 20 years of data, showing what actually sustains at scale. It was built on the internet age's fundamental illusion, confusing the attention economy's short-term dopamine with the market economy's long-term behavioral demand. It was always going to reach this point, where the perfect scam reveals itself, where the artist believes the fiction so completely it becomes indistinguishable from reality, until the market proves otherwise. A million YouTube views doesn't mean a million players willing to commit years. Forum passion isn't market size. Attention is easy to generate. Validate frustrations, champion underdogs, exploit emotions. That pays YouTube ad revenue, but it doesn't fund MMO servers or years of operations. Corporations exist not because they're evil, but because they're the most efficient point where supply, demand, capital, and labor reach equilibrium. When they stop being that, they fail. Behavior is demand. Everything else is noise. And unless something fundamental changes about how we read these signals, it happens again. Next time someone promises the hardcore MMO that will save the genre, the forums will explode. YouTube will amplify it. Kickstarter will fund it. Everyone will believe. Just like before. Because the perfect scam is the one where everyone, including the artist, believes it isn't a scam at all.